Hejsa. Maybe you saw the video where I was making these Liberty hexagons. I've started sewing them together now. I'm quite happy with how this is turning out. I think I may use these for the front of a little bag. You know, just big enough for my mobile phone and purse and lip balm or other random things. So I thought I would show you how I sew them together. There's lots of, maybe not wildly different ways of doing it, but each person has their own little differences in how they do it. So I've sewn these ones together, and I've sewn this column here together. So next, before I start sewing this together, I'll show you how I sew them together 2 and 2. I find that the easiest, that you sew them together, these two first, for example, and then I sew that one to that one, so that you get a long column of hexagons. So that's what we'll do now. So let me just move this out of the way. Right, so I've threaded my needle. I'm using this Orifil cotton thread. I think it's a 50 weight. Normally I would use a grey thread, but I haven't got any, so I'm using the white. And it's fine, because a lot of these hexagons have white in them anyway, so it's not going to be a problem, I don't think. It's just that the grey tends to sort of blend in better than the white does. But for this, it's fine. So I have my 2 hexagons. Just going to check that I've got them the right way up. So this one with the Hello Kitty is at the top, and the yellowish one is down here. So I put them together right sides facing each other, and it's important to line them up properly. Sometimes they aren't exactly the same length. I don't know if you can see, the one at the back is slightly larger than this one, but it's fine. It's fabric, so I can sort of manipulate it. So I've got a knot at the end of my thread, and then I start at the corner. I'm just catching the fabric so that I'm not catching the paper template inside. Sometimes you do stitch through the edge of the template, and that's usually fine. It just makes it a little bit more difficult to get it out. So I've gone through the corner of both of the hexagons. I'm going to go through it again, just to make it a bit more secure. I think I'm going to cut off that tail of the knot, otherwise it's just going to get caught up. And that's looking a little bit loose, so actually I'm just going to go through a 3rd time, just to make sure that everything is nice and secure. Now I have to be mindful of lining up this corner here, because it is slightly, there's a slight difference in length. So I just want to make sure that they line up at the end. So then I, again, just catching the fabric. It's only about a millimeter or so. And trying not to stitch through the edge of the paper template. And then I just basically whip stitch the two together. It's a little bit difficult to see. Can you see how close the stitches are together? They're fairly close together, about a millimeter apart. So because this is an inch, so that's about 25 millimeters. That means that usually there's about, or at least I make approximately 20 stitches along. Because it's not an exact millimeter between each stitch. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's a little bit less. Sometimes I find it a little bit awkward to hold the hexagons like this. And if you find that awkward as well, maybe try using one of the quilting clips. And then you don't have to sort of hold it and hold it in place like I have to here. And then you can just hold it here, for example, and the clip is holding everything together where it needs to be. I should have brought a clip to the table, but I didn't, never mind. This Liberty fabric, because it's so fine compared to quilting cotton, can actually sometimes be a little bit difficult to tell if you have caught enough of the fabric. So that's just something to be mindful of. Right, so I'm almost at the end now. So now I'm at the end, and I've just made a stitch through the corner. And at this point I like to just tug at the thread And for this reason, it's really good to use a thread that's quite strong. You don't want to use something that you could potentially break when you're pulling at it. So once I've done that, I'm going through the corner again. And again, that's just to make sure that everything is nice and secure. And then I come to the back of the hexagon, just one of them, and I do a couple of stitches or 3, and then I pass the needle and thread through those stitches, and that kind of makes a knot. Sometimes I do it twice, and also I pass the needle through the loop of the thread so that it ties a knot. So that's those two sewn together. And ideally you wouldn't be able to see the stitches. So let's have a look. Do you see any stitches? Maybe a little bit if I really pull at it. So that's fine. So that's what I would do to sew them all together in a column. But instead of carrying on with that, I'll show you how to sew the columns together. Sometimes it's a good idea to just run the thread between your fingers, because it does sometimes start to twist on itself, and the natural oils in our hands just helps it relax a little bit. You could also use some beeswax or a thread conditioner or something like that. Right, so let's sew these two together. I don't know if you can hear Blake. He's in his bed right next to me, and to me at least it sounds very loud as he's snoring away, but maybe the microphone is not picking it up. Right, so I have my 2 sections here that I want to sew together, and I'm going to sew this edge here first. So I'm going to flip this one so that I'm looking at the back, and as you see now, that's pointing the other direction, but that's fine, that's totally what we want. And again, just want to make sure to line up the 2 hexagons, and hopefully they line up corner to corner, unless the person who sewed them didn't do it properly. Alright, so it's basically the same thing as just sewing the 2 together. So I come in through the corners of the 2 hexagons, and I do that twice. And now I'm just gonna cut off that tail of the knot. And again, just going to slip stitch all the way along. and if necessary I keep an eye on the two hexagons not sort of starting to move. And again here, it would have been useful if I had got a quilting clip, but never mind. We'll make it work anyway. Okay, so now I am at the other corner. I'm going to do as I did before, pass through it twice. I think I've done quite a lot of extra stitches here, but never mind. Right, so now this edge of this hexagon is sewn together to that one. And now I want to sew the other edge together with this hexagon. So I turn the work a bit, and then I just fold this one so that it's folded in line with the hexagon that I'm going to stitch. It just makes it easier. And you can fold the other one on the other side as well if you prefer. Just gets it out of the way. It's a little bit easier to get to where you're working. So then line up the two hexagons and as with the other one, start with 2 stitches in the corner and then slip stitching all the way along, trying just to catch the fabric. But if you just catch the edge of the paper template, it's not a big deal. Usually it will come out easily enough anyway. When I'm working on English paper pieced hexagons, it always reminds me of a quilt exhibition I saw at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London in, I think it was 2010 or something like that. And it was quilts from several centuries and up until, I'm not sure actually, it was quite a while ago. But one thing that really caught my eye was an unfinished piece of a quilt top made with hexagons, and seeing the back of it, and I think the person who had made it had used maybe old letters or something, and I don't know, I just found it very, very moving to see that work from, I don't know, let's say 200 years ago. That was a very interesting exhibition. Although, funnily enough, at that point I had actually not really got into quilting yet. Right, so now I'm at the other end, and again I do 2 stitches. Actually, I just did a third one for no particular reason. So now I'm at the end of my thread, so I'm going to tie that off. Again, just doing a few stitches on the back of the hexagon, passing the needle through, and maybe making a loop and passing it through to tie a knot. And to carry on, it's basically the same thing. So this is what I've sewn together now. These 2 edges here. And just carry on in the same way. So let's say that I would start working on this one now. Then I would fold this one next to it, just so it's easier, because otherwise it sort of is in the way. And then I sew this one together, and then when I get to the next hexagon, again fold the hexagon that is in line with the line I want to sew, just to keep it out of the way. And because you're folding the fabric, the fabric and the paper as you're sewing it together, it's good to use paper that's not too thick. You want to use some paper that you can easily fold. So what I use to make my hexagons is pages from a clothing catalog. The paper is about the same thickness as copy paper, which of course you could use, but I like using the pages from the catalog because it's a nice way to reuse it. And sometimes you can even reuse the hexagons if you haven't stitched into them too much. So I hope you found this helpful to see how to sew these together. Maybe you do it in a slightly different way. Maybe you have some top tips. If you do, please share them in the comments. And do give the video a like. Maybe subscribe if you want to see how these hexagons end up. As I said, I'll probably make a little bag from them. They're not going in my big hexagon project. I use different fabrics for that. This is just to sort of tie me over, because at the moment I'm taking a break from the big hexagon project. So I'm working on this just slowly in the evening, stitching the hexagons together now, which is quite lovely. So I hope you have a great day and happy stitching.